Hi, everyone, and welcome to our podcast, ImmiGranted. I'm your host, Messia Dichimba. I am a regulated Canadian immigration consultant, and I've been practicing for over 10 years, helping people from all around the world to make Canada their new home. On this podcast, what we're going to do is we're going to dive into real immigration journey, expert advice, everything you need to know to navigate the extreme, ever-changing Canadian immigration system. All right, so I'll do my best to make the information easy, clear to understand, and helpful as possible. So let's go, let's dive in. All right, so first, before we dive into our main subject, what I want to talk about will be the news, the updates about immigration for this week. So, like I mentioned, ever-challenging, ever-changing immigration system in Canada. One of the new updates that we have this week, the first one will be the proof of funds. So the proof of funds have been changed. IRCC announced that yesterday that they are changing the proof of funds. So if you have an express entry profile, what I would advise you to go is to go into the IRCC website and look at the new proof of funds that they provided. And also you need to change that into your profile, in your express entry profile. So the proof of funds that we used to have, let's say for one person was 15,000, now has changed. So you need to change that to continue to be eligible for express entry. Our second update, our second news that we received will be the PGWP eligibility programs that they have updated recently. So they did announce that on July 4th, that they updated a new list of eligible programs. So if you are graduating with a bachelor degree, master degree, or PhD, don't worry about it. You're not concerned. But if you are graduating from an eligible institution and you're doing a diploma or a certificate, it's important for you to go on the immigration website and check the new list of eligible programs that they have added. The other updates, so the third update, I'm telling you, they've been on a roll. So the third update that they have added will be one that we received a lot of phone calls about. So that is the changes of to be able to work when you have a work permit and you changing employer. So immigration actually extended a policy that was already there. So that is only if you have a closed work permit and you have a new job offer. So either it's an LMIA approved or it's going to be an LMIA exempt job offer. And you are changing employer. What immigration is giving you now, or what they are changing, is you don't need to wait until the new work permit that you applied for arrived in the mail or you have it in hand. You can actually start working for your new employer right away after you receive the LMIA approved or the job offer approved. You need to apply for the work permit. Then once you have applied for the work permit, then you can apply for what is called interim authorization to work. And with that, usually it will take maybe 2 weeks for immigration to approve it. And with that, you can start working for your employer while you wait for your new work permit to arrive. So it's pretty good. So you don't have to, especially when you have a closed work permit, you don't have to wait until you have a new work permit to work for your employer. So you can actually change employer easier. So that's a great update. The last one, I think, is one that you guys are going to jump about it. It's the one that's been anticipated for such a long time, especially when that was the program that was created during COVID. So yes, you guessed it, is the TR to PR pathway. Opened in 2021 during the pandemic. So that was a great program to be able to meet the quota inside of Canada when all the borders were closed. Now, that program, apparently immigration have been there have been some talks about it, especially since last year, and apparently, still up in the air, but apparently, listen to me, apparently it's going to happen this year. In 2025, they are talking about opening the TR to PR pathway. So stay tuned. We'll be the first one to let you know. So stay tuned with us. All right, so I think that's it for the news update for this week. I think that was already a lot, right? Now we are going to dive into our main subject. Let's dive into our main subject. The main topic for today, for our new first podcast, will be what you need to know about traveling between Canada and the US. You're going to tell me, what? I'm a temporary resident. I have a student permit. I have a work permit. I'm not sure if I can travel to the US. Well, this is for you. You actually can. And also, if you're a permanent resident, how can you travel to the US? And if you are a Canadian citizen, how can you travel and cross the borders? Because it used to be very easy, especially Canada and the US, they share borders, right? So even if it looks very easy to cross on the map, it doesn't mean that it is like that in real life, especially now with our, it's not our, but with the orange president, right? So it became a bit more difficult because now crossing border between Canada and the US become more political than anything. And even if you are a Canadian citizen, of course, normally you can cross without a visa. But now being a Canadian citizen and cross between Canada and the US, it's easier, but you are not protected anymore. It helps to be Canadian, but you're not protected. There's so many horror stories about Canadians being detained, Nexus card being canceled. So this is a good subject that I wanted to talk about and share with you guys. All right, so let's start with the basic, okay? So Canada and the US, like I said, they have the most traveled borders in the world, but just because it looks easy to cross on the map doesn't mean it's really easy in real life. So the right and restriction depend entirely on your immigration status in Canada and your citizenship. So we're going to start first with Canadian citizen. So this is the easiest situation. If you're Canadian, that's good news. You don't need a visa to go to the US. You can stay up there for at least 6 months to visit family, visit business, whatever, or business meeting. You can. You don't need a visa. All you need is your Canadian passport. All right, so with the orange guy, that's been now, we are July 2025, that's his second term. So there's a little bit more political situation about that. So they are talking about a lot of enforcement at the border. So make sure that you bring your Canadian passport. And if you have a Nexus card, it's even better, even though they've been canceling it. If you're a Canadian citizen, just make sure that you are prepared with your passport, but also prepared to answer questions. Apparently, they are very aggressive about questions regarding your ties in Canada, your current job in Canada, the reason of travel. So be sure to be prepared about that, but normally you should be good. But, just make sure that you have your passport, your Nexus card, and you're ready to answer some questions. As a Canadian citizen, I know, nobody's perfect. You may have a DUI. Be careful. That would be a criminal inadmissibility and will forbidden you to enter the US. So if you have that, if you have a DUI, I would advise you to contact us because we can actually help you with that. You can have a US waiver as a Canadian citizen that's going to allow you to travel, even though you do have a DUI. Because DUI is an indictable offense, so it's very serious offense in Canada and in the US. But it happens to everybody, right? Everybody makes mistakes. So don't have that as a chip on your shoulder. Just contact us. We can help you with that. Okay? All right. So now let's talk about permanent residents. If you're a permanent resident of Canada and you actually want to cross the border. So being a PR does not automatically allow you to enter the US because being a permanent resident of Canada is not a citizenship. So you have to make sure that if you use, you have to use your passport. And if you're using your passport from a country where you don't need a visa to go to the US, that's perfect. But if you need a visa to go to the US, then that's when, you may need what is they call the visitor visa, B1, B2 visa from the US. So even if you lived in Canada for years, let's say you are a citizen of India, Nigeria, or the Philippines, you still need a visa to cross the border. So you need to get a US visa first before you can actually cross the border to USA. And it's much easier for you to apply for the visitor visa from within Canada. It's an easy process. You're going to have an interview. They're going to give you, if everything goes well, they're going to approve you. And you're usually going to have it for 10 years as a permanent resident of Canada. So it's easier for you to apply within Canada than once you try to do that back home. Okay? The same things apply. I mean, the same advice would apply regarding the questioning, especially now, especially if you're a permanent resident of Canada. So they're going to question you when they're going to approve the visa, but they may also question you at the port of entry, at the border between Canada and the US. So the same advice as for Canadian citizens applies. Make sure to be able to answer the question, to show your tie, not only to your permanent resident, your permanent country, which is Canada, and also your ties for back home. So the most important now, I would say, would be for the temporary residents of Canada. So if you are a foreign worker, or you are a visitor, or you are a student, and well, it's summer, and you actually, you know, like I said, Canada and the US share borders, and it's right there at the door. You would just like, okay, it's a weekend, I would like to just go and visit Seattle, for example. I'm talking about Seattle because you are in BC, it's very close. But you can be, for example, in Ontario, you want to go and visit Buffalo, depending on where you are. So as a temporary resident, can I do that? So that's where the things get a little bit trickier, okay? So if you're in Canada on a study permit, work permit, or visitor visa, you will need either a visa to enter the States, so depending, again, of your country of origin, if you are visa exempt or not, and you also need a TRV, which is an entry visa to enter Canada. Okay, so what I want to talk about is the misconception that exists a lot regarding foreign workers and students, international students. The misconception is about the fact that you have a work permit, you have a student permit, there is an expiry date or validity on that document, and a lot of people think that with that, my work permit or my entry, my student permit is my entry to Canada. I can leave Canada and enter with that. No. The work permit say that on the document. It says it allows you to work inside of Canada. And the student permit allows you to study in Canada. It doesn't, and if you look at your document, you will see it doesn't authorize re-entry. The most important thing that you need to pay attention is the entry visa, especially when you are from a visa-exempt, visa-needed country. Visa-exempt country, you're fine, because if you leave Canada, you don't need a visa to come back. But most of the temporary foreign workers or international student, if you are a citizen, like I mentioned, India, Nigeria, Philippines, Iran, you will need an entry visa. Make sure that your entry visa is still valid, because let's say you decide to go to the US, right? With your work permit, and you're like, yeah, or your student permit, yeah, I'm going for a week and I come back. But your entry visa actually expired. You will not be allowed to enter Canada again, and you'll be stopped. You will have, they will definitely, the US is not going to keep you, so they're going to send you back to your country of origin. And then now to apply for an entry visa from the country of your origin, even though you have a valid work permit or a valid student permit, it may take, depending on the processing time, it may take up to a year. All right, so this is very important to pay attention. The most important thing is make sure you have your visa to enter the US, and you have a valid entry visa. The valid entry visa is for you to be able to come back to Canada. Okay, so let's talk about a hidden rule. That is something that is there. It's part of the rules and regulation, but not a lot of people know about that. So if you have, I've been talking about the entry visa. So basically, in terms of immigration, we call that a TRV. So if your TRV is expired, and you're traveling only to the US or St. Pierre and Miquelon, so if you travel from Canada to the US directly, there is no stop, and you come back, even if your TRV is expired, as long as you have a valid work permit or valid student permit, you can still enter Canada. So that is a hidden rule, because remember earlier I talked about the fact, like, make sure you have your entry visa, otherwise you cannot enter. But if you are leaving from Canada to the US directly and you're not stopping somewhere in between, there is no in transit somewhere. So let's say you decide to go to cross the border to go to Seattle or to New York, but then you're like, okay, well, I want to go back home, or I want to go and visit. I want to go to Europe, then I'll come back to the US and come back to Canada. Then you need to make sure your TRV is valid. But if you just go to Seattle, come back, you go to New York, come back, then even if your TRV is not valid, it's expired, as long as your work permit is valid and your student permit is valid, you'll be allowed to enter Canada. So that's good to know. Okay, so let's summarize. Basically, what do you need to bring to the border? And that, it doesn't matter. No matter your status, this is a little checklist that you can have when you want to cross the border between Canada and the US. Especially now with the sun being out, summer, you want to travel a little bit. So make sure that you have your passport. Either it's your Canadian passport or it is coming from your home country. Do you have a valid US visa if needed? Okay, so if you are from a visa-exempt country, that you can. When I talk about visa-exempt country, make sure it's visa-exempt country for the US, because it may vary from Canada and the US. So make sure you have a valid US visa if it's required. You have your study permit or your work permit or your PR card with you. Proof of ties to Canada. We talk about of the orange person. So we need to make sure that you can show ties to Canada. So the ties to Canada can be like a return flight, return ticket, or it could be a job letter, employment letter, proof of school enrollment. So that will show ties to Canada. And usually that will suffice to DHS, which is the other CBSA one from the US. And also be ready to explain the purpose of your trip, why you want to go and visit the US. Okay, so that is what I gave you. It's a basic checklist. At least have that. You may add other documents or other information to provide depending on the reason of your travel. The question that usually comes up is, can I work or study in the US as a Canadian citizen, a permanent resident, or temporary resident? So the answer is very simple. No. You will need a valid US authorization to work or study in the US. So even if you want to cross, between Canada and the US for visit, and at the time you're like, oh, well, I get that great opportunity, or I like that school, I would like to study, you cannot do that. You need to apply, the same as in Canada, you need to apply for a valid authorization to do so. Whether you are going to visit family, attend a conference, or a quick trip to Seattle or New York, just know what you need before you cross, okay? Because at the end of the day, crossing the border is not just a road trip, it's an immigration checkpoint. So be prepared, be honest, and don't assume anything. All right, so now it is time for Q&A.
Can I re-enter Canada if I have implied status?
Okay, so that's a very good question. So the key word here is implied status. Implied status actually works only inside of Canada. So if you decide to leave Canada, you're losing that implied status. Now, to be able to re-enter Canada, we talked about crossing borders. Remember what I said. It's very important for you, depending on your status and your country of origin, to make sure that you are able to enter or re-enter Canada. If you are from a visa-exempt country, no problem. You, under implied status, you can leave, come back, no problem. Remember that you're losing the implied status as soon as you step out of Canada. So when you're going to come back usually as a visitor, and you can't work or study until you get the new work permit or the new student permit. Now, if you are from a visa country where you need a visa to enter Canada, make sure your TRV is valid. So the implied status, you're losing it, like I say, when you leave Canada. So the implied status, it's not about like, can I re-enter with the implied status? It's not a status. You need to have a valid TRV.
What happens if I'm denied entry at the border, and what should I do?
Okay, well, that's a very serious situation. So if you denied entry at the border and you are detained, what I will advise you to do is to contact us, because we can represent you with detention in admissibility. And if you are denied, basically the answer is they go in, and you're not detained, they're going to send you back to your home country.
What questions will the border officer ask me?
Depending on the reason what you are applying for at the border, now I would say it's not the same anymore, because they pretty much they shut down the flag polling, right? So you can't really do that. But if you are coming at the airport or you're a land border and they're asking you questions, you want to enter Canada and they're asking you questions, basically the basic question they're going to ask you is the reason why you want to enter Canada, what you're going to come and do in Canada. If you're coming as a visitor, what are you going to visit? Do you have enough proof of funds, money to be able to stay in Canada without working or without studying? And then, basically that's what it is. It's the reason of your trip to Canada. Okay, that's it for the Q&A. So if you have questions, I'll invite you to contact us through social media, send your questions through social media, so we're going to be able to answer them during our podcast. Fan mail. So now it's time for fan mail. So I'm going to read what we received through social media. And there is one message that I really wanted to share with you. So this message is coming for Effect Tech Hub. Hi, Effect. Hi, I really appreciate your content on Canadian immigration. I wanted to ask, do you have a community or agency that connects people to job opportunities in Canada, especially those that sponsor foreign workers? Even if it's a paid registration, I'm open to it. I'm just hoping to get a direct pass to a legit job offer. Would be grateful for any guidance. Well, thank you so much for contacting us. And to answer your question, if we have any community or agency that connects people that I can share with, we at MDS Consulting, we are an immigration firm, so we do not provide job offer. We don't do that, but we do work in partnership with an employment agency that is called SDM, Recruitment Agency. You can go into their website and they actually they focuses on foreign workers, and they help you to connect with Canadian employers and also help you with your CV, your resume, and cover letters, and a lot of tips on how you can find a job with a Canadian employer. So again, the company that we're working with is SDM Recruitment Agency. All right, so do you want your message to be featured in our podcast? So send us your message through one of our social media platforms. We have LinkedIn, we have Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all the social media platforms. You guys know it. So just send your message and we're going to be able to read it in our next episode. That's it for today's episode of ImmiGranted. Remember that if you're planning to travel to the US in 2025, don't take it lightly. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to follow the show and connect with us on all socials at mdsconsulting.ca. Until next time, I am your host, Messia, and this is ImmiGranted, your journey, your voice.